down and all around. A story of gravity. Zach leapt out of bed, and his feet thudded to the ground. Today was the day. He hummed to himself as he showered. Water splashed down over his head. He was too excited to eat. He grabbed his keys and a jacket and headed out the door. He went on humming as he cleaned his teeth and pulled his jeans and on his t-shirt. Zach, catch! As Zach walked down the path, a ball flew through the air towards him. He stretched up his hand and grabbed it and threw it back. Is today the day? It sure is. Then he climbed into his car and drove away. Hang on. Let's stop for a minute and think about the things Zach has just done. When he jumped out of bed in the morning, have you ever wondered what keeps your feet on the ground, or why the water always flows downward when you take a shower or a tap? Or why, when you throw a ball in the air, it always falls towards the ground? The answer is a mystery. Natural force called gravity. Nobody really knows what gravity is, but everyone can feel it. It's there all the time, pulling you and everything else towards the center of the earth. Gravity keeps your feet on the ground. That's why things roll downhill or fall when you let them go. Without it, everything that isn't attached to the ground would float away. And so would the air we breathe and the water in the ocean. The way gravity works was first described by using math in 1660s by a scientist named Sir Isaac Newton. He is supposed to have had an idea after he was hit in the head by a falling apple, but no one really knows if that happens. In our other stories, we have heard that this was a theory. To drive to work didn't take long. Zach parked his car and headed to the main office. Everyone was busy and bustling around. It was always like that on launch day, but today was even more special for Zach. Today was making his first flight into space. Zach had been training to be an astronaut for years. He had worked hard to keep himself fit. He had gone through all kinds of physical tests to make sure his body could cope with the difficulties of being in space. When in orbit, gravity keeps Zach, the shuttle, and everything in its orbit around Earth, because everything is falling with Zach. There is nothing to counteract the pull of gravity. He had learned how to work in a spacesuit by wearing it underwater. Being underwater is like being in space. There is no air to breathe, and things float around. He had been taught everything that was to be known about space shuttle work, and now he was ready to go. Zach changed into his work clothes and met the rest of the crew for breakfast. They were all excited, even though some of them had been into space before. Zach knew he had hours to wait before the launch. That wouldn't happen until much later. In the meantime, the medical staff gave the crew a final checkup to make sure they were healthy and recorded their weight. What we call weight is actually gravity pulling down on all the stuff that makes up your body. When scientists talk about how much something is made of, whether it is a feather, an elephant, or you, they use the word mass. Wow, you're really massive is referring to the actual mass that the elephant weighs. So that's where the word massive comes from. Mass is not the same as size. Something can be small or heavy because it has a lot of mass. An apple is heavier than a balloon, for example, because it has more mass than the balloon. At last it was time for the flight crew to board the shuttle. One of the ground crews strapped Zach into his seat and gave him a thumbs up and asked, "Are you okay?" Zach nodded nervously. The crew waited while the crew checked rockets were made. Then the shuttle rocked and roared into action, and everything shook as it lifted off the launch pad. Here we go. The spacecraft has to travel fast enough and far enough to get above Earth's atmosphere, the air that is surrounded by the Earth, to get into orbit. What was that? This means it must reach a speed of more than 17,000 miles per hour, 3 times faster than the fastest aircraft. To climb almost 186 miles above Earth's surface, to do this, the shuttle must ride piggyback to a pair of very powerful booster rockets. 2 minutes after liftoff, the shuttle was 28 miles above Earth. Bang! Bang! The 2 booster rockets were used up. They dropped away and fell back to Earth. The shuttle went faster and faster. It was speeding up so quickly it made Zach feel 3 times heavier than normal. He felt as if a giant hand was pressing him into his seat. The main engine shut down and for a few seconds, there was another loud bang. This time, the giant fuel tank fell away. Small rockets in the tail hiss as they boost the shuttle even higher. Then suddenly, everything went quiet. Zach was in space. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief and released their seatbelts. Zach floated up from his seat and his head touched the ceiling. Someone bumped into him and he felt something bounce away towards the opposite wall. "Sorry," said Anne. Zach reached for a strap to hold on to. He was feeling a bit space sick, but he knew it wouldn't last long. It was his body getting used to being weightless. "Isn't that great? I think I'm going to be sick." When you are in orbit around Earth, you fall with everything else that surrounds you. Because the shuttle and everything in it is falling together, you float around in any direction. There is no up or down in space. Soon it was time to get to work. Zach's job on the flight was to find out how animals are affected by being in orbit. When gravity pulls them around the Earth instead of against Earth, he had a rat and a fish on board the shuttle, and he needed to make sure they were okay after lunch. Zach chose to have an orange juice, a fruit cocktail, beef with veggies, and pudding. He added water to each container and warmed up the beef in the oven. Hours later, Roy, the pilot, tapped Zach on the shoulder, and he realized he was starving, and he grinned. All of these were his favorite. To save storage, space shuttles, most of the time, have food and drinks that are dried, and water is added when they need to be eaten. Water is squirted through a tube, so none of it escapes and floats into the cabin. When food is ready, Zach puts the container on the tray, along with his knife, fork, and spoon. Velcro strips hold everything in place. Zach strapped the tray on his knees. He had made himself eat very slowly. If he grabbed his food too fast, it would move away from him. It wasn't the only astronaut who floated. Everything else was floating too. When Zach let go of his fork, it stayed in midair until he had a hold of it again. Just after a few days, Zach got used to life on board the shuttle. He learned how to sleep in a sleeping bag that was hung from a wall. He didn't mind washing himself with soap wipes instead of having a shower. Showers were not a good idea in space because the water just breaks into droplets and floats away. Gravity keeps the water droplets in orbit with the shuttle. He got quite good at strapping himself onto the toilet with his feet on the footrest and 2 bars pulled across his legs. One thing he never got used to was seeing Earth from space. He loved to watch the bright colors on his planet as it rolled beneath him. It is vital to stop waste and dirt floating in the spacecraft. On a shuttle, solids and liquids go straight into a special container and bags. It is stored and taken back to Earth. Zach liked looking at the moon from the shuttle, and he could clearly see the shadows of the shapes. The moon traveled on an endless journey around and around the sun with its partner, the Earth. Earth's gravity kept one side of the moon's face facing us. The moon also pulls on Earth with the same strength that Earth pulls on the moon. It is the moon's gravity pulling on our ocean that makes the rising and the tides fall. 2 weeks raced by, and Zach was amazed when it was time for the shuttle to return to Earth. Suddenly, everyone was busy cleaning up the crew area and packing away their equipment. Where did all of this stuff come from? Zach strapped himself on his seat and took the last look at space. It sparkled with millions of stars like grains of sugar on a black tablecloth. A shuttle dived back into the atmosphere. As the shuttle slowed, gravity began to pull the crew against the chairs. Wow, this is getting hot. When something moved through air, it rubbed against the stuff that air is made of. The rubbing action is called friction. The shuttle was falling so fast that friction made its surface glow red hot. It also slowed the shuttle down. Roy guided the shuttle towards the landing site, and everyone held their breath. As the wheels touched the runway, a parachute billowed out behind it. Air filled the parachute and pushed it backwards. The open parachute pulled against the shuttle, helping slow it down before it reached the end of the runway. Everyone cheered. They were glad to be safely home, where they were familiar with the effects of gravity. But Zach knew that all of them would jump at the chance of going into space again.